Lovely to.
Sorry about that. Need to record all your gems.
Lovely to see you all and to hear the various communities that you're managing and coming from. And thank you, Susan, for your very kind words. Just to give you a little bit of background as to why I think this is a really important area, and I come from this, is that in 2014, as part of my journey in dispute resolution, I'm a barrister by training, and I've got into this whole dispute resolution thing. I sit with parties as a neutral to try and resolve their disputes, mediation, arbitration. Sometimes I'm on one side negotiating. And one of the things that I was always struggling with was, how do you handle those negative words, negative comments that are being said sometimes in front of the other side to you about your behavior, what you're saying, and how do you avoid those reactions that take this conversation into a very difficult place, much more difficult to handle than it already began with. And so I went off to Harvard to do the masterclass on negotiation. And when I got the reading, a lot of the reading was about feedback and constructive and negative feedback and how you give feedback. And I was like, well, what's feedback got to do with negotiation and mediation? But actually, when I got there, I started to realize that one of the biggest challenges of conflict management, conflict resolution, is being able to manage negative feedback, give positive feedback, give a response to negative feedback. And so over the years, I've been very keen on what I call conflict management, where feedback and receiving feedback becomes a big challenge. But also from the world that you guys come in, where you've got membership and there's expectation, maybe you don't get to meet your members regularly, even in person, because it's an online community, it's all around the world, is that the way in which you communicate lends itself very well to people to give negative feedback or words because they don't feel they have to face you. They're not going to see you. You know, we've got the keyboard warriors we talk about on Twitter and other places. We are in a digital negative feedback world. And I have lots of tools and strategies that we use. And rather than give you a formal presentation, because I think that is just pitching it anywhere, I really wanted to engage with you as the community managers, and maybe to share examples like, fortunately, Samantha Watkins has said that, you know, you haven't had necessarily negative feedback, but then there's the flip side is, have people renewed or stayed in the community, and what happens when they leave? And if they leave a WhatsApp group, therein is a negative exit. Everyone sees someone left the WhatsApp group. So if anybody would love to volunteer some negative feedback, some feedback that's not been positive, that you've tried to, or you've had to deal with, and then we could have a little discussion, and I can then share some ideas with you, rather than just sort of pitching a big lecture on you, which I don't really want to do. And I thought would be good to understand where you're coming from. And you don't have to share, but it would make things easier for me to share with you, depending on what you have experienced.
Is everyone here really lucky and never gotten any negative feedback from their members?
I can share some.
Sure.
So basically, it's not related to exactly what I'm doing right now, but it's so we have a family business, so it's a beauty salon, and my sister, she's the owner, and she constantly gets negative feedback from people, and I mean, she faces it a lot. But there was one situation when there was one client would be leaving negative feedback every single time whenever she comes and visits the salon, and sometimes it wouldn't make any sense, and it feels like that person is just targeting the place constantly. And at first we were offering like free services, then we'll give a discount and etc. So in our case, we don't know like how exactly we deal with such people who are like constantly targeting your business and also like posting it on socials, on Google reviews, on Facebook. so that everyone sees. And in case we see that there's like several messages are being the same, we like kind of stopped replying, and she would be adding like another reply saying that, oh, you're not even engaging with me, etc. So like trying to find the reason. So at first I was able to help her to reply, create a response, and like a strategy how to deal with that client. But then when it was a constant repetition of it, I didn't know, like I was lost. I didn't know how to help, how to proceed.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's a really, really interesting and common situation. And in fact, I might want to share with you that a few years ago, I was advising TripAdvisor on hotels and restaurants that would receive a negative feedback about an experience at a restaurant or a hotel or a bar. And then it's so devastating. And then by the time you try to engage with the person that left the feedback, you're already now deemed a bad restaurant or a bad provider or a bad bar or bad hotel. And we were looking at this idea of using digital online emergency mediation, we would call it, where a third party would come, speak to both sides and say, look, what was it that went wrong with you? What made you so upset? And is there something that the hospitality place can do to fix what happened? Because a lot of people will leave without complaining, but then go and complain online, right? They don't raise the complaint immediately, like maybe that person who you've just spoken about. So they don't do something about it then. And I've always wondered about that, because, you know, for guys, and I'm generalizing, but when I go for a haircut, I don't feel so vulnerable as maybe other people do, because I'm a short back and sides kind of haircut, and I'm in and out, and if it's a bit too short, it grows back quickly. I don't worry about it. But if you're coloring your hair, or if you're styling it in a particular way and it's not the right tone of the color or the shade, then you get upset. And what people tend to do is, because they're worried about saying something, then they don't. They go home, the feeling intensifies, and now they have the keyboard warrior movement behind the scenes, because I can say what I want and I'm not in front of you. And I wanted to ask you 2 questions about this customer. Have you invited the customer to a meeting ever?
Yes, we did.
And did they come?
No.
Okay, so that tells us one thing already, right? That this person loves to be able to give you the abuse, if I want to call it that, and I will call it abuse. I think it's in a form of abuse, because we all love constructive feedback, but we don't like feedback that is repetitive, it's targeted, and it's undermining an activity. And, you know, running business, as we all know, is very difficult at the best of times. And we always want to be customer service driven. We want to give our best services, but we get individuals that start to undermine the very nature of what we're trying to do. And when you invite them, and I think that's the first thing to think about, is do not respond, if possible, to online comments, but rather try to get on the phone or get on to a face-to-face meeting. Now, face-to-face is not always possible, especially if they're thousands of miles away, you've got an online product going on. But there is so much to be said about being in front of that person. Okay, so that's one first tip I would always recommend. We get, my organization, we get people that say, well, you know, we did this, but it wasn't what we thought it was going to be, etc. Immediately, the email will say, we're really sorry that you've experienced this. Can you give us an option to speak to you to understand more? So it's not to apologize, it's not to correct it, it's to understand more about what your experience, because we want to learn from that. Okay, so it's even how you invite them to the table. There are a few other tips, but that's a really interesting situation. Anyone got any other issues with regards to membership and feedback and negative comments coming through at all?
I mean, one of the things, oh, go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry, so I did just think of one actually. I wasn't present for it, which is why I forgot about it. But on my one that we do, the construction group that I run, we break out into individual Zoom rooms, and they normally go into breakout for, I think, 10 minutes. and then they come back into the room. And when they came back into the room, someone was missing. Their chair was there, but they'd gone. And they hadn't put themselves on mute. So I could hear what they were saying behind the scenes. But what had happened was, it was a planning consultant who was vehemently against, she lives in Cornwall, and she was vehemently against Airbnb because it made a lack of housing for local people. She was completely against second homes and all of that. And she happened to get into the room with another lady who was a lettings agent, but for holiday lets. So most of what she did was Airbnb type scenarios. And apparently they had a big set to in the room, which led to the B&B lady crying. The other lady is a bit of a force of nature, and she basically just took herself out of the situation, and she just paid her membership, which is just short of £1,000 a year plus a monthly subscription. And she wanted her money back, basically. And I could hear her talking to her husband in the background about what had happened, and so could the other lady who it had happened with. And it was just, yeah, it was quite mortifying.
And that's a really great example, Samantha. And did you guys follow up to maybe mediate that, or to do something with it?
I tried to mediate. I said, can we all three of us get in a room and talk it through? And the lady, she just said, no, I want a refund. I don't expect to come onto an online forum and end up in tears. I thought this was a friendly, supportive group all about growing your business and blah, blah, blah. And so I said, okay, you know, really sorry to hear that. Let me think about it over the weekend, because we don't give refunds, and this has never come up before. So I thought about it over the weekend, and I went back to her and I said, look, what if I ask the other lady to leave, or tell her that she has to leave? Because, you know, it shouldn't be you that has to leave. From what I've heard, you know, you're the one that was picked upon, you weren't the protagonist. And she said, no, I just want my money back. I just want my money back. So that's what we did in the end. And to be fair, I haven't even addressed it with the other lady, because it's a franchise organisation that I run, and the main franchiser just said, I'll just leave it, it'll all blow over, it's all just something over nothing, which again didn't really quite sit right with me, because she might bully someone else another time.
I think that's and I was going to use the word, you just used it at the end. One of the things that we have to be very mindful of in membership organizations and general work that we do where we get this feedback is we could end up promoting or allowing a bully to stay in a particular place, okay? And the differentiation between negative feedback, which can be dealt with, versus constant abuse, which is then coming from a bully, okay? And what we're seeing in the online world is the bullies love it, because probably in person they wouldn't even say half those things. But we have this distance. I mean, you know, I'm online with you, we're all sitting at our desks in our rooms at this platform, and yet I'm not sure I'm going to see any of you ever again. And so if I wanted to be really difficult, I could be, and the consequences don't feel so real. And that's the other challenge with managing negative feedback, is to distinguish between the bully and the non-bully. And I think one of the things that I've got into is taking a very strong action against those that are disruptive bullies. And so, yes, you may have given the refund to the lady because that's the only thing she wanted. You could also say to her, I'll refund you, but stay in the community because we have got rid of this lady. Right? And that's the other way to say, look, we can't force you to stay, but we want you to stay. So if you want a refund, go. But you should also know that this other person will no longer be a member of our community. And making those strong decisions allows your community to show that negative feedback will not be tolerated. because that then becomes this idea of culture. And, you know, we've all been seeing on the news about the CBI and other organizations where there's this culture, and the cultural environment is where we don't take positive action. And so I wanted to say to you, if you are able to, and again, taking hard action, positive action is not an easy thing to do when you say to a customer or a client or a member that your behavior is falling so short that we can't allow you to stay, is quite big. But then the rest of the community then starts to see that this is not going to be tolerated. Because in your breakout room, I don't know who else saw that, Samantha, and what other people felt from that conversation, but it might make people think, well, hold on, what's happened? And then if they realize that the person has left, they wanted to leave, it's quite difficult. And organizations are now having to be more executive in their decision making. In the past, you know, that kind of comment you just had from somebody else that said, it will blow over. The blowing over idea that we used to have, where don't worry, time will just kind of get this back on track. We're seeing younger people, if I can say that, who are less tolerant of this kind of behavior. There's a certain, you know, I grew up in an environment, especially at the bar, where you didn't deal with that kind of conflict, it would just blow over. Now people are like, no, it's not good for my mental health. I'm not going to tolerate this. I'm out. Like that's, and I think many of you will nod to those kinds of comments that are being that are shared often. I'm just looking at the comments. Community values important. Yeah. How many of you have a value statement in your community?
We're just writing one at the moment for the accountancy one. I've only just joined in May, that particular group, and they didn't have one, and I think it's quite important. Well, I think it's paramount, to be honest, but it's taking a little while.
And again, this is something I've been doing with a lot of organizations on a global level, which are companies that are in difficult areas of business, maybe oil and gas, where there's a whole carbon thing going on. We've got people in certain kinds of sectors of work where people don't understand quite what they do, but so what they're trying to do is to create a value statement so that people understand, members understand, clients understand. And also what value statements do for organizations is they draw lines. They draw lines to say, if you step over these values, then we will remove you. And people say, well, this is very arbitrary, you're going to move me. You say, no, you've breached our value statement. And values, I think, are very, very important to be articulated. And I think you have to take time. So Samantha, you know, you said you guys are going to do one. I would encourage you to take your time doing it. Don't rush it. It's a very important piece of work because it then allows you to display the ambition and the values of the organization, but also to then allow people to join and then to remove where you feel that feedback, that those comments have gone beyond something that you guys can tolerate, right? And we are now living in a very inclusive agenda. The idea is always to be diverse, but also inclusive. So we want to encourage everyone to be there, but we also want to be inclusive. And inclusivity cannot be at all costs. I think that's the strapline I tell all organizations I work with. Inclusivity has to be based on a certain parameter and value system. And if you have that, you're going to be in a great shape to move forward with enforcing and being more executive. Yeah, Becky, I agree. They 100% help with enforcing that feedback loop. Great. Anyone else got any other examples of any negative feedback that's come through in your organizations? No? Okay.
One of the things that you said earlier as well, though, Ryan, that kind of jumped out was also the managing of expectations, right? Having kind of a clear value set. Also, what is your community or membership going to deliver in terms of, you know, sometimes you get these statements of, if you can get someone on the phone after they cancel, oh, I just didn't see the value. I didn't see the value of paying that, that renewal fee. So it might not be negative per se, to say, again, be bullying or negating against the organization, but that member didn't see the value. And sometimes the question, we're working with customers, I'll say, well, what did they expect to get, right? What were they hoping to see? Because negative feedback can, I think, sometimes be objective, right? That person didn't see a value in renewing their membership. So I think something that you said, something just sparked the whole idea of managing the expectations in the first place so that the feedback doesn't come back around in that way.
Yeah. I wanted to build on that too. And also this, how many of you ever got one of those tough emails from a colleague or someone in the organization saying, just not happy with what you did or said in a particular meeting or the way you treated me? How many of you have got those kind of tough emails? Any hands up going at all? Yeah. Right. So this idea that those keyboard warriors take it into another workplace dimension, and the reason I mention that is I want to share with you a really great organization called the High Conflict Institute, HCI. And you can look them up online later. They're based in California. And they were set up, co-founded by a chap called Bill Eddy, E-D-D-Y. William Eddy. And Bill is a dear friend of mine now. And I undertook many of his masterclasses many years ago in the States, and we took him around the world to do different sessions. And he's an author. He's written some incredible books. In fact, he wrote a book at the beginning of 2016 called The Trump Bubble, when President Trump was running in the primaries. And then he got elected, and then everything that Trump said or did was almost in the book, because he worked out his personality, and he's a big personality critique. Anyway, he's come up with a great acronym for dealing with difficult conversations, when you receive negative feedback, when you need to engage with people that are tough. And I can share that with you. It's called the BIF response, B-I-F-F, if you want to write that down. And you can then, I'll share the acronym with you, and then you can have a think about it. All right, so first of all, he says, when you get those emails that, rile you up, that you read it and you think, this guy's always, attacking us about this, or always complaining about this, right? So the first thing is, BIF comes into play, right? So before we get to BIF is, do you need to respond? Ask yourself that first question. Do I need to respond? And if you do need to respond, then we kick into BIF. And I use BIF a lot with coaching people, but also with my own team members. We're now in 41 countries around the world. I have huge cross-cultural challenges. I've got people that are super direct with me. I've got people that are not direct with me, but that will get there around the houses. B stands for brief. Your response must be brief. So we're not engaging in line by line responding. We don't have to write an essay back, several paragraphs. You want this to be brief, okay? B is for brief. I is for informative. So rather than just responding, give information. So there must be something they learn from this. Okay? Brief, informative. The first F is for firm. So you're very firm about what you're saying or you want to be done or how it should be done. And the third F is to be friendly. Brief, informative, firm, and friendly. Now, the friendly bit, you've got to be really careful about, right? Because we don't want it to look like I'm being strong and then I'm being your best mate. But it also doesn't mean that the response has to be with exclamation marks and, I don't like this and I don't like that. It is, and I hope that this response allows you to allow us to get back to the project, to where we are, to what's going on. Okay. Now, when we have BIF as a response, one of the challenges, and comes back to the value statement, is from what compass point are we responding? So again, if it's a negative feedback about an event or not appreciating certain offerings from the membership community, the value that they say that we're spending this money, we're not thinking we're getting value for money, etc. Then when you're doing a BIF, if it's a really tough email to you, where do you align the compass response? And so I would urge you as membership organizations to have your value statements, your mission statements as your compass point to respond. Right? So there's got to be some compass point. I'm not using the word moral compass, but you know where I'm going with this, right? There's got to be some anchor that allows us to engage in those conversations. Okay. So Bill Eddy, when you have some time, and you can look up BIF, and what's great on their YouTube channel is they've got some really good examples of how people have said certain things and how you might respond. Now, they might not be exactly how you want them to be, but I think there'll be enough for you to play with to start understanding how that works. The second thing I wanted to share with you is a great author and a great book that I use a lot. And the author's name is Sheena, S-H-E-E-N-A, Sheena Heen, H-E-E-N, Sheena Heen. She's a professor at Harvard. And her book is called Thank You for the Feedback. Thank You for the Feedback. And the way this book is written is not from the user who wants the feedback, it's from the person who's receiving the feedback. Okay, so how is it when we appraise, when we give feedback, what is it the structure in which we might want to give it? What are the rules through which we can give? And one of the methods that they use is called kiss, kick, kiss. You might want to write that down. Kiss, kick, kiss. Okay. So kiss, loving response. Kick, I'm not too happy with this middle bit, but I'm going to end it with a kiss again. And this is really useful as a tool in one-to-one feedback. So if we've managed to identify a situation, whether it's to your members or in your teams that you manage, and there's some challenges, maybe it's not the BIF response, because BIF is about a quick response to an email or a WhatsApp or a communication. This is more about helping someone to understand where you align, you work, how they can do something. And so kiss, kick, kiss is a great way of doing it. So some positive feedback. Couched in the middle is the slightly negative or tough feedback. And then back to something more positive to give it. Okay, so we don't shy away from giving it, but we put it into the middle of other positive pieces of feedback.
I think my husband uses this on me sometimes. Right? He needs to get that little the feedback in, but he knows he better compliment me first and compliment me after.
But I think, I mean, don't tell my wife this if she's going to watch this ever, but I do that with her quite often when I need to give her some feedback about something that's not gone particularly well, or I think she's going to handle it better. I start with the positive, right? You know, oh, darling, that was great. You know, really good. However, I just thought that middle bit, you could have done that bit better. But then again, you know, that other bit you did, and I couch it, and she's like, oh, that's great. And I get to practice it quite regularly. And now she practices it on me, actually, because before she'd be like, you haven't done this. And that would be like, shh. And then I'd react, right? So she now says, well, you know, that thing, yeah, you did that, but you didn't do that. And I'm really upset about that. But also that was great. And it's just managing. Now, there's many other tools in Sheena Heen's book, and I'm not going to go through all of those. We haven't got the time to do that. But I think these two, in managing the memberships, in managing your people, when you get those little keyboard warrior moments, or you get this person who keeps coming back to your salon for repeat customer service, but then wants to complain, there seems to be a challenge with not engaging. That this person wants to be heard, because when they say you're not even engaging with you on social media, then there's another situation going on, that they want to be acknowledged. And I would say in that situation, we have tried to engage you and we'd love you to come back and talk to us in person because we want to help fix what you feel has gone wrong. Yeah. Dima, it is the sandwich method, right? Yeah.
I mean, how many of you guys struggle with not getting enough feedback? Like you want more feedback and you just feel like members don't give it to you. Is anybody facing that challenge? Because I know sometimes we get some of the questions we get from our communities are, how do we get people to talk more? How do we understand, get them to tell us, it's like crickets almost, right? Sometimes you hear from just the people who are unhappy and some of your super advocates, but the big chunk in the middle, the 80% usually doesn't engage at all. So I don't know, Ibrahim, if this is it's a little bit off topic, but I don't know if you have any tips and tricks of trying to elicit feedback when you're not getting anything, when the feedback is like, I'm not engaged enough to even talk to you. Can we, because my gut is I asked the question, but I assume based on the introductions is a lot of the communities here are online. And I think it's also probably us looking at the way we're asking questions, the way that we're portraying information, because it's so easy. I think, Ryan, when I took your course, one of the things I always took away was, what is it, 80% or 90% of what we say is in our body language and our expressions and our faces and our voices. And so you see something online, it may not even be coming from a negative place, but we might read it negatively or interpret it that way. So I guess two things there, right? What can we potentially do to elicit feedback when we're not getting any? But also the other side is it's not a question, but it's how making sure that we're also portraying ourselves in the correct way online, because things can just be misinterpreted.
I like that question, and I'm going to just give a few of you, because I run a membership kind of bit of our business where mediators, arbitrators, negotiators are on our panel. And we have a global panel now. So we've got people from different parts of the world. And one of the things that we realized probably a couple of years ago, post-pandemic, was that the panel was getting so big that the interactions with people, so we would know the active ones, but the inactive ones were very difficult to engage with, especially because we didn't get to see them regularly. So what we did, and again, it may not work for you, but is to create lots more subgroups. And what you find in subgroups or subspecialties or sub-events is that then in the smaller groups, the less engaged would engage more. And so because we're online and people are in India and people are in Singapore and people are in South Africa, but the subgroups allowed people to really engage, because otherwise they're maybe more introverted, maybe they're a little bit less engaged. Maybe the membership was for more status than it was to really engage, but actually they really had good points if you could find a way in which to get them into a subgroup. So they're part of the larger panel, they're part of the larger group, but the subgroups allow them to engage more regularly. And you will find that those people actually will engage in smaller groups. Larger groups just feel way too big for them. And they feel that they're a bit more of a follower rather than a leader. But if they've got something that's more specialized and more akin to them, I think you find that they grow. And again, this may not be relevant to your membership models and your organizations, but I think it's really important to try and engage in smaller groups where possible. Someone said you've got 21 million membership members. Well, phenomenal. And you're never going to be able to create that many smaller groups of 21 million. And maybe you don't really care too much about the ones that don't engage if there's enough engagement taking place on an online level that they're okay with it. But where we've got communities based around geography, around business, around particular common themes that are tangible, I think that you should think about breaking down the groups. So you can still have the bigger group, but I think, and what we've spoken to some trade organizations is that they're subspecialties, they're subgroups, even based on age profile, where people of a similar age can come together and talk. The engagement changes big time. And then you see that the feedback is positive and not so negative, because the first bit is the renewal and I'm happy to engage and I want to give you more feedback, starts to show you that they're doing a better job of that. So
yeah, I mean, groups is definitely something we've seen even just across all of the networks in Ugenie. So, giving people a place to be more targeted, because that's the other thing sometimes that people can feel things are not relevant to them in a bigger forum where it's just lots of generic, even within a trade forum or within a professional association forum. I mean, for example, we work with the British Pest Control Association, and their subgroups are bees, rodents, insects, because they have different types of pest control people in there, right? So they've created subgroups for those, the people within the community to be able to talk even more specifically about the types of pests that they're tackling. So we've definitely seen that across the board with groups. I mean, even when I mentioned, some very small communities, we have a small community of 30 women, and they've got lots of subgroups because they've got so many different topics that even a small group wants to talk about. So they might have they have a parenting chat, they have another chat about health and fitness, just kind of also creating those different streams of conversation so things can be really, really relevant. We've seen an uptake when people start to strip out that from the main feed and things. So definitely, I think it gives people the opportunity to voice themselves more.
Anyone got any other examples that you wanted to share where you've had some challenges with membership or otherwise?
Well, we are coming to the end of the hour, so if there isn't too much more from people, I know Rahim had very kindly said he could go over if we had lots of questions, but thank you so much. I think that's been really useful, and a lot of anything you can share, to be honest, I think is so transpires across. It helps in memberships, it helps in regular business, it helps us in just interpersonal conversation. So hopefully, I loved hearing you talk and hearing some of the tips, because again, they translate across so many different things. If anybody does have anything else, I don't mean to cut off. We do have some time. If there's any questions you have, even if that is with your husband or your wife or your partner, and you're like, how do I tackle this? How do I get my husband to pick up his socks? I'll be like, thank you, babe, for picking up the sweater, but the socks are still sitting there from last week. And thanks for doing the laundry. So, it's, you just forgot to do this. I will definitely be using that more as well myself, but does anybody else have any questions, any feedback for Ryan? Hopefully positive, please, but he'll show you how to handle negative if anybody has got anything negative. But no, I found that really useful. Thank you so much. I'll open up the floor. If you have any questions outside of handling feedback, if anybody has any burning community management challenges or
Hello.
Get across to the group.
Hello.
Hello.
Good days. Thank you, Susan, for this meet. It's actually an eye-opener. Although my background is quite different from most of you here, because I come from the crypto background where we manage crypto communities. So I understand quite well that the expectations of community members are quite different when you are a member of certain organizations. In regards to dealing with negative feedback, especially in crypto where expectations are very high. So let's say for a crypto project, maybe an NFT project or a token where people come in and expect that prices will be favorable within a short period of time, and it's not happening that way. You start seeing community members, we call it FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD. And they start talking about, why is this not happening? You guys are not doing enough. This project is not working. You're not posting more. You should post more on social media. You should do more games. You should do more giveaways. And you see that all of a sudden it starts spreading to other members that have been loyal to the project. So how do you think? We had a system whereby we do a ticket. If you have any problem, you do a ticket. So that way we try to cut you off from the main community, so you don't spread your negativity to other members. But in some cases, some of these guys are persistent, and it's usually not advisable to kick them out of the community, because it doesn't give a positive, positive idea as to somebody's complaining about something, and the next best thing is to just throw them out of the community. So it doesn't give confidence to. So how do you think another way you can manage such a situation amidst a lot of fear, uncertainties, and doubt, especially as regards to a particular project doing positively well? Thank you.
It's a great question, and it's I can see that the expectations on crypto could be quite quite high, volatile, etc., etc. And thank you for sharing. Look, I think if we were just to take away what the trade is and just look at the challenges that you're raising, which I think can be raised in any membership or trade kind of organization, then I come back to those principles that I think we've talked about in this session, which is number one, managing expectations. Are you managing those expectations clearly, number one? And two, is there a positive opportunity to raise feedback so that the feedback comes because there's an idea generation rather than you're not doing enough, right? So if someone's saying to you, you're not doing enough, then my response would be, here's an opportunity for you to tell us what we should do better. What can we do more of? And we'll tell you why we can or cannot do that, because it might be a resource thing, then maybe they can be involved in helping you with the resource. You can empower them. So I think it's changing. And the last thing I wanted to share with this group is this idea of reframing. So when people give negative words and comments, there's a way to play that back to them, which allows it to be a positive thing rather than a negative thing. So if someone said to me, you're not doing enough, then I wouldn't say, no, of course we are, because that's being defensive. I'd be like, so I would love for you to help us understand what else we could do. And I will share with you our challenges in doing more, but maybe you have solutions to help us break those. Right? It's got to be, it's language based. So when people come with difficulties to you saying, well, you could do more and you're not doing enough, and they're quite vociferous, they want an arena to share and to be heard. So can you think of a way to create that arena so that they're being heard and it's a positive experience? It's building on something. It's telling them, look, we would love your assistance in developing this better. So, but you know, I think your challenge is quite specific, because the expectation where people have invested money or wealth, and that wealth is not maturing as quickly as they would like it to, is a very difficult conversation. And you will see that when things are to do with money, family, the emotions are so big that it's quite difficult to deal with. And we haven't even got into the psychology aspects of the brain yet, which is a whole different topic, which we could talk about one day. But you need to play differently. So I'm not avoiding any more of a response, definitely, but just to share with you, I think maybe it's to bring them into a more positive environment to help you think about what else you could do with their assistance.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rahim. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the top things we can take away, right? When we get negative feedback, it's an opportunity to learn and grow and improve our offering, whatever that might be. So I think that's definitely our mindset here, is when people tell us, you know, a lot of times what we need to do better, or what more we need to add to the platform, you know, we take that on as a really good piece of way to help us develop the next offering. So I think, you know, the online community concept as well, you know, all these forums that we build and create is a great way for us to elicit feedback on how we can improve. And hopefully, I think when members see us doing that, they also say, okay, well, the ones that are not talking, or the ones that are potentially happy, can see the culture we're building, right? That we're going to listen to them. We're going to try to improve based on feedback and so on. So, but yeah, we're coming up toward the end of the hour. I know everyone, thank you so much for being here with us today. We'll send out the video of this in case you want to pick up anything that, you know, you might have just been listening on to. We'll put some thoughts. I was trying to take some notes in the chat if that was helpful for everyone, but we will send the recording out. If this topic interests you and you want to do some more training on it, Rahim is going to share with us some of the things that his company does specifically that might be most relevant to, you know, our world of memberships and communities. So we'll share that with you guys as well. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, any challenges, any topics for future meetups, please feel free to share. We've built the next 5 or 6, but we're always looking to build out the next lot of meetups, and we can build them around topics that you guys might find useful. And of course, if you are If you don't have a home for your community, well, of course, come check out Ugenie, set up a time to speak to Jordan and I. Or if, if there's any challenges you're facing on the tech stuff, we're here for that as well. So thank you again. Hope you guys have a great day. Rahim, thank you so much for spending your hour with us today.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Susan.
But yeah, we hopefully will see you guys next month, same time, same place. And I think next month we're talking about how to work with influencers. I can't remember 100%, but it's one of the ones that I'm really excited about, because we're going to have a influencer come join us who's got a 40,000 person TikTok following. She's got 30,000 on LinkedIn. She's building a community around this. So it may not be next month, but I know it's coming soon over the summer. Either way, we'll send out the topics. If you follow us on LinkedIn on Ugenie, you can see our event schedule for the rest of the summer, and join in when those topics are of interest. But other than that, we're gonna say goodbye to you guys today. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.